It is a pleasure to have you here, Doctor, and the floor is yours. When you're ready, you can share your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Okay, hi, thank you, the organizers, for organizing such a nice, wonderful lecture series, wonderful talks, and today's session specifically focused around digital health and digital therapeutics. And I also thank you all for inviting us to give our perspective, share with you our perspective on FAIR principles, FAIR data in life sciences. I will first begin by introducing who we are, who is Ostrus, followed by I will speak briefly. Do you see my pointer as well?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So then I will speak about why do we need FAIR, what is the rationale behind FAIR. Then I will talk about the data assets, which really form the core of FAIR principles, and some tricks on how you can make your data assets fair. I will also introduce briefly what the FAIR principles are and demonstrate with two examples how the leaders in life science R&D are using or practicing these FAIR principles in their daily businesses. So at Ostrus, we are system integrators. We provide consulting and system integration services to top 20 leaders in life science industry to facilitate the R&D processes in their daily businesses using our scientific domain expertise, knowledge, and innovative data-centric approaches. We understand that value, we understand the value of data. We know that data matters, and we help you realize the value of your data. And we are one of the front runners in these areas. My previous colleagues have published or authored publications on this topic, and I welcome you to have a look at them. Let me begin by asking you a question. Do you recognize this picture?
I personally don't.
This is a scene or a still from the Hollywood movie called The Day After Tomorrow. Now imagine that on this right-hand side, these buildings are your R&D labs, and each and every day, this ocean or we are bombarded with data, thanks to the rapid advances in technology and decreasing costs of generating data day by day. And that is why we need to really embrace ourselves. We need to prepare ourselves for this tsunami of data. Take any field, whether it is high throughput biology or chemistry or social sciences, astrophysics, we have humongous amount of data. The real challenge here is that how to make sense out of all this data. Because if we are not successful in doing this properly, then we will get lost in this tsunami. And honestly speaking, this is beyond reasonable human capabilities. And that is why nowadays we employ machines or computers for this purpose. You also saw in the previous talk how digitalization in general is more prevalent in our every aspects of our life. Take for example, our wearable technologies, the smartphones, smartwatches that we use, or the health monitoring apps on our mobile phones. We are getting digital, and we cannot escape this revolution. We live in the era of digital revolution. And to give you an example here, digitalization or these technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence, these are really driving innovations in the complete life cycle of a medicine, right from its discovery to preclinical, clinical studies, all the way up to their impact on patients' health. And therefore, the question that we need to ask ourselves today is, can a machine understand our data? Can a machine understand us? And it is in this context that our data needs to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Because it's not just that humans understand our data, but nowadays it is also important that machines do as well. And again, the word of caution, FAIR is not same as open data. FAIR data and open data are different things. Open data is any type of data that anybody can access freely, reuse freely for any purpose. Whereas FAIR it gives you a framework, a standardized framework to use that data or share that data in consideration of certain ethical or legal or contractual obligations and aspects. So these are two different terms. Now there is a value in making your data fair, because if we do not do that, we are taking a big risk. We are looking at huge costs arising from we delay the innovations, we prolong the time to market, we underutilize our resources, and all this gives rise to these increased costs. So, in order to avoid these challenges, the best way is to think about making our data more and more fair compliant. Let me dive into a bit of history or origins of FAIR. The need to recognize or the need of making your data fair was first recognized in academia, right at the turn of the century by the founders of these PLOS journals. They did mention the words FAIR as we know them today, but nonetheless, the foundations of FAIR principles lie in this open letter or the open public library that they had proposed at the time. This led to the members of OECD to recognize or establish certain principles, 13 of them, and they define these principles on how to access the digital research data which is funded publicly in a cost-effective manner. So we are speaking about research data generated in public institutes or public universities and access to this data in a cost-effective manner. In 2013, as the field became more and more aware, in 2013, for the first time, the science ministries of G8 nations recognize the need of such a standardized network or standardized framework to share and access and reuse the data. And they also define these principles. And by this time, the industry players also started becoming aware the importance and relevance of data, this data or verification of data, so to say. And all this culminated into the foundation of this Go Fair initiative. A lot of diverse set of stakeholders were involved in this, including academia, including industry, even funding agencies and governments were involved in establishing these FAIR principles as we know them today. At the core of FAIR principle lies the data. And when I alluded to this before, we have humongous amounts of data and we need to treat it with respect. What I mean is, so back in 2007, the OECD, when research data was the focus, they defined it as factual scientific records. This included results, papers, slides, or even logs, etc. But today, big sharks in the industry, such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and whatnot, they have really taught us that not just research data, but certain other data types also can be used to generate revenue, even the likes on my vacation pictures. So, therefore, today data is a new oil, and it generates value. So today we have to look at data as an entity that generate or that is important for the value chain of our institution or organization. It creates certain strategic and operational value to our business processes. So we should not think of data just as an exhaust or a dump that we generate it and here it is. No, we should start thinking about data with the fact that it can generate revenue. So it's an asset for us. And in our experience with the different projects that we are involved in, we have this kind of a scenario that value of data is not realized or it is underestimated at best. So here is a scenario that I have mentioned here. So your data assets lie on one side, while the data consumers, they are on the other side. In between lies a fence, unfortunately a thorny one. Why do I say that? The data that gets generated is often of bad quality. It needs cleaning, it needs processing, transformation, so on and so forth. Even if the data is of good quality, you cannot find it easily because it is locked in some silos, in some computer hard disk or in some department and there somewhere. Even if you can find it, data consumers cannot access the data. And this happens because of poorly defined data governance infrastructure. So all in all, the data consumers do not get to use or do not realize the value of their data assets. And this is really a challenge. And this is why we need to make data fair so that it can be used effectively. So what are the FAIR principles? So as I have mentioned, these are 13 of them. I'm not going to go into details of these, but they were defined and identified by this Go FAIR initiative. And I encourage you to go to the website to look into this. The point here is that these principles are applied to data as well as the metadata. So metadata is described as data about data. So it describes how your data is. That is metadata, and these principles are applicable to both. Another interesting point that I want to say is that knowingly or unknowingly, we are practicing FAIR principles to some extent. For example, all of us or many of us know the unique and persistent identifiers with which we identify chemical compounds, caste registration numbers, or our publications, or identifiers of our favorite gene or protein in some databases. And not just humans, not just us, but even machines can read and reuse these identifiers. Similarly, even today, a 3-year-old kid knows how to access information from Google. Some of us also know that Google or similar web services use HTTPS, an open, free, universally implementable protocol. And even today, our machines can retrieve information using these identifiers and these protocols from wherever the data is located. We also have today standard vocabularies, a standard terminology, field-specific terminologies that we use and these machines use to make data more interoperable. So speaking of biology field where I come from, we have gene ontologies or disease ontologies, and such vocabularies increase the interoperability of data between two humans, a human and a machine, and between two machines. Also, we are familiar with data usage licenses. Think about HBOs, Amazon Prime Videos of the world. And not just that, but we also have patents, technology transfer agreements or licenses of COVID-19 vaccines more recently to be reused across countries and continents. Similarly, we have domain relevant community standards, for example, Miami standards for reporting microarray experiments. All in all, we are using FAIR principles to a certain extent, but we are not there yet. Why are we not there yet? Naturally, because it's not so straightforward. Had it been, we would have achieved it long back. So even though an institution or an organization has all the resources, all the tools, policies, standards, or even money, what it requires in addition is a cultural change. You need to think differently in order to identify your data assets, and secondly, make them fair. And how will you achieve this? You will achieve this only when you start thinking or start envisioning how the scope of your data will increase, how it will become when it becomes fair. And once you can think about such things, then you can start identifying the data assets and make them fair. So how to prepare ourselves, how to achieve this? One way to do this is to link our data assets. Naturally, because 1 plus 1 is more than 2. So imagine a situation where we get a much better understanding of a disease when we have data, in vitro data from labs, in vivo data, in silico data from computational predictions, or clinical data from hospitals. When we get these bits and pieces of data and we prepare a collage, it is then that we get a holistic view of our data. And this increases the impact of our research. Individual pieces of data only give us a partial view. Even we run into the risk of getting biased or have a myopic view to look at our data or research. So this is linking your data is really important. And one way to do that is as described here in Data 42 project by Novartis. So Novartis is involved in clinical research for decades together. But so far, these data were all scattered. Excel still dominated in some ways or the other. And the data were disconnected because, as I said, they were isolated in some silos or in some departments. Then they asked a question, what if? And this is exactly what I mean by a cultural change. We should ask ourselves such questions that what if these data assets are linked and we provide them not as individual data assets, but a linked network of it? Can we answer can we ask the right questions and can we answer them in a better manner? So to give you an example here, they had about 2,800 studies, clinical studies, which accumulated about 2.4 million clinical variables, age or gender, etc. And when they mapped onto a standardized set of target variables, look at the reduction in dimensionality. And this mapping or this reduction allowed them to define or use these variables across three different standards and they make them interoperable. This is the beauty of linking data because they can identify the relations between them and they can make it interoperable. Another cool example, and so the point that I would again like to emphasize here is that any of these individual clinical variable would not have told you so much about your research or the results. But now when they come together, when they become interoperable and all together in a linked manner, they tell you much better story or much better results. So this linking of data assets really has an impact in shaping your results, which is important. Another cool application that I would like to share with you is Project Callit, which is at Bayer. And this is really a forward-looking thing because they are trying to capture findability or F. And without F, AIR cannot be achieved. So what they did is they registered their data assets. These are chemical compounds or protocols or even primary results. They registered or documents. They registered these data assets by assigning uniform resource identifiers, the persistent identifiers that I spoke to you earlier. And then an application user can search against this treasure of data using the relations, graphical relations that they established using this. So it is these kind of technologies, these kind of thinking that is essential and the way in which you can make your data fair. So I will summarize by saying that please remember that data is not just a dump, it's not an exhaust, it's an asset, and we need to learn how to use it wisely. I also spoke about FAIR principles as defined by the Go FAIR initiative. And I also spoke about the change in mindset that is necessary to start implementing or thinking about implementing these FAIR principles. And with these two examples, I showed you how leaders in life science industry are already doing this. So as I said in my previous slides, we have to embrace for this tsunami of data. And there are initiatives with which people are already doing this. Lastly, I would like to conclude by saying FAIR will widen the scope of your data. It's just that you need to envision how it can get bigger and how can you use it effectively. But with the word of caution that it's not a free lunch. It costs money. It doesn't come easy. And therefore, it is important to know where to start. And for this, it is also the first step you can take is that to begin to ask yourself question, where do I stand currently? How mature is my data in my organization currently? For example, if a new colleague is joining a new project or a company, he or she would be interested more in findability and accessibility because they would like to know where are the results and all. On the contrary, if a colleague is leaving a project or a company, he would like to keep his data in such a format which is interoperable so that his colleagues, which are still working in that R&D department, they can reuse that data. So you need to think what is more important or what matters to you in current scenario in your R&D issues, and we can definitely help you there. Finally, I would like to make you aware of this forward-looking statement disclaimer, and once again thank the organizers for arranging wonderful talks, and again the audience for patient listening. And I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much, Doctor. This was really interesting, and just a thought that I was having whilst you were presenting. Do you think this wave of data would be the next big challenge scientists are facing that would make every other problems obsolete and just not as important and difficult?
Well, I would not say it will make every other problem obsolete, but I will definitely say that this verification of data is a challenge because it's not so straightforward, and people are not yet ready to think in that direction. That yes, a scientist is generating data in the lab, but it is disconnected from the revenue generating value chain of the business. That is a challenge. That is the gap that we need to bridge.
Yes, thank you so much. And we have one question from the audience, and it says, how do you think that we can sustain an access across countries to these principles and fair data in general?
That's a very good question. So this Go Fair initiative, of course, they can be, or the G8 ministerial joint statement. The governments also need to be aware and they need to work together in order to bring this verification into the culture of institutions, universities, and industries. And that's the only way we can give access across countries and continents. And COVID-19 vaccine or these technologies transfer agreements are a very good example. Unless we have such a framework, two different countries cannot collaborate. So the only way is to work together on this and to be aware and address this problem or challenge head on.
Indeed. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation, and we really appreciate your contribution to our program, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us again.
You're very much welcome.